Get comfortable, settle in, pull the blanket up a little. Tonight, we are going somewhere familiar, a place you have probably visited hundreds of times without ever fully knowing it. We are going to Springfield. For the next few hours, 200 facts about The Simpsons are going to wash over you. Some of them you will know, some of them will surprise you. Some of them will make you see the show in a way you never have before. All of them are worth knowing. There is no rush here. The facts will come slowly, one by one, like turning the pages of a book in a quiet room. Let your mind wander. Let the stories carry you. And if you drift off somewhere in the middle, that is perfectly fine. Springfield will still be here when you come back. It always is. Section 1. The Origins, How The Simpsons Was Born. Facts 1 through 20. Fact 1. The Simpsons did not begin as a television show. It began as a 30-second animated bumper for a sketch comedy program called The Tracy Ullman Show. In 1987, producer James L. Brooks was developing the show and wanted short animated segments to fill the gaps between live-action sketches. He reached out to cartoonist Matt Groening, who was already known for his alternative comic strip Life in Hell, a darkly funny series about a rabbit named Binky navigating an absurd and painful existence. Brooks wanted Groening to adapt Life in Hell into animation. Groening agreed to a meeting. He showed up with the characters, sat in a waiting room outside the offices, and then changed his mind. He did not want to give up the rights to characters he had spent years building. So sitting there in that hallway, he invented an entirely new family from scratch. He sketched them out on a legal pad in the minutes before the meeting began. The father was originally going to be named Homer, after his own father. The mother was named Marge, after his mother. The kids were named Bart, Lisa, and Maggie after his siblings, with Bart being an anagram of brat, which felt right for the character he had in mind. The family had yellow skin because Groening assumed the show would be animated cheaply, and the yellow would make them immediately recognizable, even on the lowest quality television screens of the era. He walked into that meeting with a fully formed family. The meeting lasted about an hour. The Simpsons were greenlit almost immediately. Fact 2. The first Simpsons short aired on April 19, 1987. It was called Good Night. The premise was almost laughably simple. Homer and Marge say goodnight to each of their children at bedtime, and each child has a slightly surreal, slightly unsettling reaction. Bart worries about the nuclear meltdown he saw on the news. Lisa worries about the state of the world. Maggie falls asleep almost immediately, which, given everything we later learn about Maggie, feels either perfectly innocent or deeply strategic. The short was only about 90 seconds long. The animation was rough, jagged, barely recognizable compared to what the show would become. The characters' proportions were off. Homer looked more like a crudely drawn yellow blob than the specific Homer we know. But something in the writing was immediately there, the warmth, the slight darkness, the sense that this family was a little broken and completely real. Fact 3. The Simpsons officially premiered as a half-hour series on December 17, 1989, with an episode called Simpsons Roasting on an Open Fire. It was a Christmas special, and almost by accident the episode that was supposed to be the pilot, Some Enchanted Evening, had such severe animation problems when it came back from the Korean studio that it had to be pulled and completely redone. Simpsons Roasting on an Open Fire was rushed into production as the replacement. It worked. Homer discovers his Christmas bonus has been canceled. He keeps it secret from Marge. He takes a second job as a mall Santa. He gambles his earnings on a dog race and loses. The dog Santa's little helper comes in last and is abandoned by his owner, so Homer brings him home. The family ends up with no gifts and no money, but they have this beautiful, ridiculous greyhound, and somehow that is enough. For a first episode, it established almost everything the show would ever be in about 22 minutes. Fact 4. Matt Groening named the town Springfield deliberately because it is one of the most common city names in America. There are Springfields in Oregon, Illinois, Massachusetts, Missouri, Ohio, and dozens of other states. The intention was always that viewers would feel like Springfield could be their Springfield, wherever they happen to live. Groening has admitted in interviews that he specifically grew up near Springfield, Oregon, and that this was part of the inspiration, but he resisted confirming it for years because the ambiguity was part of the joke. The show spent 3.5 decades dropping contradictory geographic clues, placing Springfield near mountains and coastlines and deserts and the Canadian border, depending on what any given episode required. The location was never meant to be solved. Springfield exists somewhere between every American town that has ever existed, and that is precisely why it feels like home. Fact 5. The show was produced by Klasky Csupo, an animation studio for its first 3 seasons. The founders, Arlene Klasky and Gabor Csupo, had met in a recording studio, fallen in love, and started the company together. Their aesthetic, slightly rough, slightly grotesque, full of interesting imperfections, defined the earliest look of the show. Characters had overbites and strange proportions, and a kind of handmade energy that felt unlike anything else on television at the time. When the show transitioned to film Roman in Season 4, the animation became smoother and more polished, which is part of why early Simpsons fans often say the first 3 seasons feel slightly different. They do. They were made by different hands, with a different philosophy, and the fingerprints are visible if you know to look for them. Fact 6. The voice cast was assembled in a way that was, by Hollywood standards, almost revolutionary. Rather than hiring separate actors for each character, the producers encouraged their small group of performers to play multiple roles. Dan Castellaneta, who voices Homer, also voices Grandpa Simpson, Barney Gumble, Groundskeeper Willie, Mayor Quimby, Krusty the Clown, Hans Moleman, Sideshow Mel, and approximately 50 other recurring characters. Julie Kavner voices Marge and also voices Marge's sisters Patty and Selma, as well as their mother Jacqueline. Nancy Cartwright voices Bart, Nelson Muntz, Todd Flanders, Ralph Wiggum, and Database. Yeardley Smith voices only Lisa, which is a notable exception. She has always been a one-character performer on the show, though she has occasionally voiced Lisa's double in alternate universe episodes. Hank Azaria originally voiced an enormous range of characters including Apu, Chief Wiggum, Professor Frink, Comic Book Guy, Snake, Moe, and many others, though his role has been significantly restructured in more recent years. Harry Shearer voices Mr. Burns, Smithers, Principal Skinner, Ned Flanders, Kent Brockman, Dr. Hibbert, Lenny, Reverend Lovejoy, and a range of other characters. The economies of this casting model allowed the show to populate Springfield with hundreds of recurring characters on what was, by television standards, a relatively contained budget. Fact 7. Dan Castellaneta developed Homer's voice by doing an impression of Walter Matthau. In the early days of the Tracy Ullman shorts, Homer's voice was a slower, more deliberately gruff approximation of Mathau's particular gravelly drawl. Over the course of the first season of the actual series, Castellaneta gradually refined it into the voice we know now: higher, faster, more elastic, capable of conveying Homer's specific mixture of childlike wonder, deep stupidity, and occasional unexpected tenderness. The evolution happened naturally through recording sessions, through finding what the character needed. Castellaneta has described the Homer voice as something he can slip into instantly even after decades, the way a singer can return to a song they know by heart. It lives in his body at this point. Fact 8. Nancy Cartwright was originally auditioning to voice Lisa. She went into the audition having prepared for Lisa, read the character breakdowns, and decided that Lisa felt a little flat for her as a performer. When she saw Bart's description, underachiever, troublemaker, a kid who lives in the moment and never suffers consequences the way he probably should, she immediately wanted that role instead. She asked if she could try Bart in the room. The producers said yes. Within minutes it was clear. Bart was hers. Cartwright was cast in the role the same day, signed a contract for a modest per-episode fee, and was committed before she fully understood what the show was going to become. She has said in interviews that she signed that original contract for $500 per episode. Her salary per episode many years later ran well into the 7-figure range. Fact 9. The show's theme music was composed by Danny Elfman, who wrote it in a single day. Elfman has described the process as almost automatic. He sat down with the assignment, thought about the family, thought about what the opening sequence needed to feel like, and the theme simply arrived. He recorded it with a full orchestra, and later said he was surprised by how quickly it came together given how iconic it became. The theme has been re-recorded and subtly updated multiple times over the decades, but the core melody has never changed. Elfman himself has said he occasionally hears it played somewhere in public and still finds it a little surreal that something he wrote in an afternoon became one of the most recognizable pieces of music in television history. Fact 10. The original pitch for the show described it as a show about a family that is loving but deeply, specifically flawed not in a sitcom way where the flaws are cosmetic, but in a way that was meant to feel genuinely real. Groening and Brooks talked about wanting to make a show where the parents were not the authorities. Homer was not supposed to be the wise father who dispensed lessons from a position of comfortable competence. He was supposed to be as lost as his kids, maybe more so. The family was supposed to feel like it was surviving rather than thriving, staying together not because everything was perfect, but because the alternative was unthinkable. That core idea never changed. Across 36 seasons and hundreds of episodes, the emotional engine of the show has always been the same. This broken, beautiful family will always find its way back to each other. Fact 11. The show was not an immediate critical success. Reviews for the first season were cautious. Some critics found the animation crude. Some found Homer too dumb and too mean. Some were not sure what to make of Bart, who felt unlike any child character that had appeared on American television before, unrepentantly chaotic, unwilling to learn lessons, unapologetically himself. The network was nervous about Bart in particular. There were internal debates about whether he was too much, too anarchic, too likely to be a bad influence on actual children watching. Those concerns were not entirely wrong. Bart became a phenomenon, but the phenomenon was more complicated than anyone had anticipated. Fact 12. In the early 1990s, Bart Simpson merchandise briefly outsold Michael Jordan merchandise in the United States. T-shirts, lunchboxes, posters, action figures, video games. The Bart economy was extraordinary and slightly overwhelming. The most famous shirt read, "Underachiever and proud of it, man," and it was banned in numerous school districts across the country. Parents' groups protested. School administrators sent letters home. Some states had informal bans on the merchandise. The controversy only made Bart more popular, because that is how counterculture works, especially counterculture aimed at 10-year-olds who desperately want something to belong to. Bart was their flag. He was the thing that belonged to them and not to their parents. And the harder adults pushed back, the harder kids held on. Fact 13. President George H.W. Bush gave a speech in January of 1992, in which he said he wanted American families to be more like the Waltons and less like the Simpsons. The writers responded with extraordinary speed. Within 2 days, they had written a new scene and inserted it into the opening of an already completed episode. In the scene, the family watches Bush's speech on television, and Homer fires back, "We're just like the Waltons. We're praying for an end to the Depression, too." The line aired within days of the original speech. It was one of the earliest examples of the show's ability to respond to the real world in near real time, and it set a template for how The Simpsons would engage with American politics for decades to come. Fact 14. Matt Groening has a particular way of embedding his own name in the show. Most famously, the number on the Simpson mailbox 5742 is not random. It is the address of the real house in Portland, Oregon, where Groening grew up. The street is Evergreen Terrace in the show, which is also a direct reference. There is an actual street named Evergreen in Portland's northwest neighborhoods where Groening spent time as a child. He has salted his autobiography into the geography of Springfield in dozens of small ways that most viewers would never notice, but that are unmistakably personal signatures embedded in a cartoon that has been watched by hundreds of millions of people. Fact 15. The design of Springfield's nuclear power plant was based loosely on the Trojan nuclear power plant in Rainier, Oregon, which was visible from the highway when Groening was growing up. He has described driving past it as a child and finding it both fascinating and slightly terrifying, this enormous industrial structure humming with invisible power, dominating the landscape, impossible to ignore. The plant in Springfield has those same qualities. It is never truly in the background. It is always present, always looming, always the engine of everything that happens in the town, whether the episode acknowledges it directly or not. Fact 16. The show was nearly canceled before it ever aired. After some enchanted evening, the intended pilot came back from Korea with animation so severely flawed that characters were changing shape between frames and colors were entirely wrong. The production team panicked. There was a real possibility that the network would look at the disaster and pull the plug before a single episode had aired to the public. The team made the decision to fix every single frame that needed fixing, which took months, and to air the Christmas episode first while the repair work was done. The gamble worked, but it was genuinely close. The Simpsons almost did not happen because of a color error in a Korean animation facility in the summer of 1989. Fact 17. Groening has always maintained a complicated relationship with the show's success. He has described moments of feeling like the show went places he did not intend, like it was a train that left the station and kept accelerating past stops he had imagined. He has also described deep pride in what the show became something that outlasted every expectation, every prediction, every timeline anyone could have reasonably constructed in 1987 when he was sketching a yellow family on a legal pad in a Hollywood waiting room. The show became something larger than any single person's vision. That is usually how the best things happen. Fact 18. The original Simpsons shorts from The Tracy Ullman Show are legally owned by Fox, not by Groening or any of the core creative team. They have been released on DVD but were not included with the main series releases for years due to rights complications. There are 48 of them in total, and watching them is a genuinely fascinating experience. You can see the family taking shape, becoming themselves, finding their rhythm. The humor is rougher, more anarchic, sometimes stranger than the show would later be, but the love is already there. Even in those first jagged 30-second shorts, you can feel how much Groening cared about this family. Fact 19. James L. Brooks, who produced the show from the beginning, came from a tradition of intelligent, emotionally layered television comedy. He had created The Mary Tyler Moore Show and Taxi before The Simpsons, and he brought to the animated series the belief that comedy and genuine emotional weight could coexist, that a show could make you laugh and also make you feel something real in the same episode. This philosophy is so embedded in the DNA of The Simpsons that it is almost invisible, but it is the reason the show has moments that genuinely move people. The discipline of not letting the comedy become a shield against real feeling came directly from Brooks. Fact 20. By the time the show reached its 5th season, it was not just the most successful animated series in American history. It was being studied in universities. Academics were writing papers about it. Philosophy professors were using Simpsons episodes to teach ethics. Economists were using Homer's financial decisions as case studies. The show had crossed a threshold from entertainment into something that functioned more like a cultural text, something you could read, analyze, interpret, argue about. That had never happened with an animated show before. It has not quite happened since in the same way. Before we move into the characters themselves, drop a comment and tell me where you are watching from and what time it is there. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now is a good moment. There is a lot more to come. Section 2. The characters' hidden depths behind the yellow faces. Facts 21 through 45. Fact 21. Homer Simpson's full name is Homer J. Simpson, and his middle name is a deliberate nod to Jay Sherman, the pompous critic character from the animated show The Critic, which shared some creative personnel with The Simpsons. The connection was never explained on screen. It was simply placed there, a quiet inside joke embedded in the full name of the most recognizable animated character in history. Fact 22. Homer's IQ has been stated on screen as 55, which would place him in the range of moderate intellectual disability by the clinical standards of the show's era. However, the episodes that explore Homer's intelligence in any depth suggest the number is not entirely accurate, or, at least, that the 55 reflects a floor rather than a ceiling. When Homer has the crayon removed from his brain in the season 12 episode Homer the Moe, his intelligence expands dramatically. He reads voraciously. He writes a scientific paper. He becomes capable of recognizing the deep structural problems in his own life with a clarity that is almost unbearable. The crayon episode implies that the real Homer, the Homer who exists beneath the damage, is someone significantly more capable than the man we spend most of our time with. He chose to put the crayon back. That choice is one of the most quietly devastating things the show has ever done. Fact 23. Marge Simpson's famous tower of blue hair is, within the show's own continuity, a wig. This was established in an early episode and then largely ignored for decades, which is very much how The Simpsons handles its own continuity. The implication is that Marge's natural hair is much shorter and quite wild. The blue tower is her chosen presentation of herself to the world, a structure she maintains with extraordinary consistency across 36 years. Given everything else the show suggests about Marge's psychology, the wig theory is interesting. She is a woman who contains enormous complexity and enormous suppressed intensity, and she presents to the world a perfectly constructed exterior that she maintains every single day. The hair, natural or not, is very much part of who Marge is. Fact 24. Bart Simpson's name was chosen in part because it is an anagram of the word brat, But Groening has also said he wanted a name that sounded slightly cutting, slightly sharp. It has one syllable. It ends hard. And when shouted, which it frequently is, it carries a particular percussive energy that softer names would not. Groening has mentioned that he went through lists of names before landing on Bart, and that once he had it, no other name felt right. The character and the name seemed to find each other. Fact 25. Lisa Simpson was the character Groening felt most personally identified with as a child. He has described himself as the kind of kid who cared intensely about things that other people found unimportant, who found it genuinely painful to be surrounded by people who were not as interested in the world as he was. Lisa's isolation, her sense of being too much for Springfield while also being entirely of Springfield, reflects something real in Groening's own childhood. She is in many ways the show's conscience. She is also the show's most consistently heartbreaking character, because she is always fighting for things she cannot quite win in a place that does not quite want to be won. Fact 26. Maggie Simpson's voice, the sounds she makes through the pacifier, were originally performed by various members of the production team in a casual, improvisational way. Over the seasons, the pacifier sounds became a form of language in themselves, recognizable and expressive enough that longtime viewers can read Maggie's emotional state entirely through them. Her first spoken word, Daddy, was voiced by Elizabeth Taylor in the Season 3 episode Lisa's First Word. Taylor was brought in for the role because the producers wanted the word to feel like an event, like something that deserved special weight. Taylor agreed to do it for scale the minimum union rate, because she was a fan of the show. It remains one of the most memorable celebrity moments in the series. Fact 27. Mr. Burns' physical design was inspired by several sources simultaneously. The production team wanted a figure who represented concentrated, ancient corporate power, someone who looked like wealth had been pressing down on a human being for so long that it had changed the shape of the body. His sunken chest, his enormous head, his tiny, nearly vestigial hands, the way he moves through the world with a combination of supreme confidence and total physical fragility, all of it was calculated. He was also modeled in part on two specific real people: media mogul Barry Diller and Fox Television president David Silverman, both of whom the writing staff found instructive examples of a certain kind of power. Burns became something more extreme and more archetypal than either of them, but the inspiration was grounded in observation. Fact 28. The relationship between Mr. Burns and Waylon Smithers is one of the most carefully constructed dynamics in the entire show. Smithers' devotion to Burns, his willingness to subordinate every aspect of his own life to the maintenance and comfort of this ancient billionaire, was written from the beginning as something that went beyond professional loyalty into something more complicated and more personal. The show circled around the specifics of Smithers' feelings for Burns for years before finally stating them clearly. In the Season 27 episode, The Burns Cage, the show explicitly confirmed what had been subtextually obvious for decades. Smithers is in love with Burns. Burns does not return those feelings in the way Smithers needs. The show handled this with surprising gentleness, no mockery, no cruelty, just the quiet sadness of a man who has organized his entire existence around a person who can never fully see him. Fact 29. Ned Flanders was deliberately designed as Homer's opposite in almost every quantifiable way. Where Homer is physically soft and emotionally impulsive, Ned is disciplined and controlled. Where Homer ignores his responsibilities, Ned fulfills his with almost mechanical consistency. Where Homer's faith is casual and occasional, Ned's is total and consuming. The show intended this contrast from the beginning, but what the writers did not fully anticipate was how much more interesting Ned would become once they started revealing the architecture beneath his niceness. The episode Alone Again Naturadiddly, in which Ned's wife Maud is killed, and Hurricane Neddy, in which Ned's psychological history is revealed, transformed Ned from a comedic foil into one of the show's most genuinely complex figures. Fact 30. Apu Nahasapi Mapetilon, who ran the Quick E-Mart, was voiced by Hank Azaria for the show's first 29 seasons. Azaria developed the voice based on an impression of Peter Sellers performing an Indian accent in the film The Party. The character became one of the most widely recognized figures in the show. He also became the subject of increasing criticism, particularly following the 2017 documentary The Problem with Apu, which argued that the character represented a harmful and reductive stereotype. In 2020, Azaria announced he would no longer voice the character. He subsequently issued a public apology and engaged in a series of conversations with members of the South Asian American community about the impact of the portrayal. The character has appeared only minimally in more recent seasons, with no consistent replacement voice established. Fact 31. Chief Clancy Wiggum was named after Robert Wiggum, a character from a short story by Flannery O'Connor. The writing staff of the show has always been extraordinarily literate. The writer's room in the early seasons contained people with advanced degrees in philosophy, mathematics, literature, and history, and their reading lives bled constantly into the show. Character names, episode titles, background signs, throwaway gags, all of it is layered with references that most viewers would never catch, but that the writers found deeply satisfying to include. Wiggum is one of dozens of examples. Fact 32. Groundskeeper Willie became one of the show's most beloved recurring characters, almost entirely through the performance. Dan Castellaneta described the Willie voice as emerging from a specific kind of Scottish bravado, a man who has suffered enormously and refused to let the suffering diminish his sense of himself. Willie's backstory, glimpsed in fragments across many episodes, is genuinely tragic. He has lost jobs, relationships, his homeland. He lives in a shack behind Springfield Elementary. He cleans up after children who barely notice he exists, but he carries himself with the dignity of a man who considers himself the greatest living Scotsman, and the gap between his self-perception and his circumstances is where all the comedy lives. Fact 33. Sideshow Bob Robert Underdunk Terwilliger Jr. is the show's most recurrent villain, having appeared as an antagonist in more episodes than any other single character in that role. He is voiced by Kelsey Grammer, who has said the role is one of his favorite pieces of work because it allowed him to be simultaneously threatening and absurd, genuinely dangerous, and completely ridiculous. Grammar-based aspects of the performance on theater actors of a certain classical tradition, people who were trained for Shakespeare and found themselves in circumstances beneath their considerable dignity. Bob's constant thwarting by Bart is supposed to feel genuinely embarrassing for someone of Bob's intelligence and capability, and Grammer plays that embarrassment beautifully. Fact 34. The character of Dr. Nick Riviera, known for his signature greeting, "Hi everybody," was based on the pattern of real healthcare fraud cases that writers had researched. The joke about Dr. Nick is not simply that he is incompetent, but that he is specifically the kind of incompetent who maintains the surface appearance of medical authority while being catastrophically dangerous underneath. He accepts any patient, performs any procedure, charges whatever seems appropriate. He is Springfield's healthcare system reduced to its most alarming essential logic. Fact 35. Krusty the Clown was originally conceived as the secret identity of Homer Simpson. In the show's earliest development, the idea was that Homer led a double life at home. He was a tired, disappointed nuclear plant worker, but somewhere out there he put on a costume and became a beloved children's entertainer, and neither world knew about the other. The concept was abandoned before production, but the echoes of it are still visible in how similar Homer and Krusty look, same build, same eye shape, same slightly dazed expression. The show has acknowledged this resemblance within its own universe, suggesting that Bart's love of Krusty is in some way connected to the fact that Krusty looks like a happier, more celebrated version of his father. Fact 36. Patty and Selma Bouvier Marge's sisters were specifically designed to be unflattering mirrors of what Marge's life could have been without Homer. They are also single. They also smoke. They are also dissatisfied with their lives in a way they have metabolized into low-grade contempt for everyone around them. But the show has always treated them with a certain complicated affection. Selma's desperate desire for a child, her string of failed marriages, her adoption of a daughter, her episode in which she briefly marries Troy McClure, all of it reveals a woman who wants more than her circumstances have delivered. Patty is given the episode in which she comes out as gay, which the show handled with surprising warmth. They are not just comedic figures, they are portraits of what disappointment does to people over time. Fact 37. Comic book guy, real name Jeff Albertson, a name revealed only in the season 16 episode, Homer and Ned's Hail Mary Pass, was based on a composite of specific types of people the writers had encountered in nerd culture in the early 90s. The combination of extreme expertise, extreme social isolation, supreme confidence in the value of his own opinions, and complete obliviousness to how those opinions land on other people was observed and crystallized into a single character, Comic book guy has become something of an icon in a meta way. He is a cartoon character who represents a certain approach to fandom, and he appears in a show that is itself one of the most heavily analyzed texts in the history of fandom. There is something pleasingly recursive about that. Fact 38. The character of Sideshow Mel Melvin Van Horn exists almost entirely in the margins, but his backstory contains one of the show's best-kept dark jokes. Mel was hired to replace Sideshow Bob after Bob was arrested for framing Krusty. He took the job knowing he was the second choice, knowing he was filling a slot vacated by a criminal, knowing he would spend his career as a sidekick to a man who barely acknowledges his existence. Mel is also clearly intelligent. He speaks in an elaborate, theatrical manner, plays the slide trombone, and occasionally reveals flashes of genuine capability. He chose the background on purpose. There is something Maggie-esque about Mel, if you look at it from the right angle. Fact 39. Grandpa Abe Simpson, Homer's father, was based in part on the specific experience of having a parent who has outlived their era. The show uses Abe to explore how people who were once vital and relevant become invisible to the world around them. His stories ramble. His references are from a time no one else remembers. He lives in a retirement home and is visited infrequently. But the show has always taken care to show that behind the rambling is a man who did real things, who loved people, who was shaped by specific historical experiences that still matter to him even if the world has stopped caring. His relationship with Mona Homer's mother is genuinely moving when the show allows it to be. Fact 40. Professor Frink, John Frink Sr., was based on Jerry Lewis's character in The Nutty Professor. The Frink voice, which Hank Azaria developed, is a deliberately heightened version of a specific kind of panicked intellectual energy, a mind that moves faster than the body can manage, so the body spills over itself trying to keep up. Frink has predicted numerous technological developments within the show's universe, and been ignored every single time. He has warned Springfield about disasters that subsequently occurred. He has solved problems that no one credited him for solving. Frink is Springfield's version of a prophet, technically accurate, perpetually dismissed. Fact 41. Disco Stu, Stuart Discotheque, appeared in a single episode originally as a background gag and became a recurring character based entirely on audience response. He was not planned as a recurring figure. He was not written with any depth in mind. He simply showed up in the right episode at the right moment, wearing the right disco outfit with the right level of commitment to a dead cultural movement, and something about him resonated with viewers in a way the show could not ignore. He became part of Springfield's permanent texture because the audience wanted him there. The show has always been responsive to that kind of organic audience love in a way that top-down network shows rarely are. Fact 42. Milhouse Van Houten, Bart's best friend, was named after President Richard Nixon, whose middle name was Milhouse. Groening has said he considers Milhouse to be the most unfortunate name he has ever given a character, and that this unsuitability was entirely intentional. Milhouse is a child for whom everything is slightly harder than it needs to be, for whom the world never quite arranges itself in his favor, for whom even his best moments tend to come packaged with some counterbalancing humiliation. His name is the first signal the show sends about who he is going to be in the world. Fact 43. Ralph Wiggum, Chief Wiggum's son, began as a background character with no defined personality and became, through accumulation, one of the most beloved figures in the entire show. His non-sequitur observations, "My cat's breath smells like cat food. I bet my Wookiee. Sleep, that's where I'm a Viking. Work because they are never mean-spirited and never cynical." Ralph exists in a world that is slightly different from the one everyone else inhabits. His internal logic is consistent, his emotional responses are genuine, his world is simply organized differently. There is a warmth to his strangeness. He is strange in the way children sometimes are, with total sincerity and zero self-consciousness. Fact 44. The character of Lionel Hutz, voiced by Phil Hartman, was shot and killed by his wife in a tragedy that devastated the show's cast and crew. He had voiced Hutz and Troy McClure and several other recurring characters, and the decision was made immediately that no other performer would take over those roles. They were quietly retired. Troy McClure had been one of the show's most beloved recurring figures, an actor past his prime using infomercials and educational films to stay visible, and his absence left a genuine hole. The tribute the show paid to Hartman, dedicating a subsequent episode to his memory, was simple and sincere. Fact 45. Edna Krabappel, Bart's teacher, was voiced by Marcia Wallace for 23 seasons. Wallace died in October of 2013. The show again retired the character rather than recast, and the episode that aired after Wallace's death included a simple card reading in loving memory of Marcia Wallace. Bart was shown writing the phrase, "We'll really miss you, Mrs. K," on the school blackboard during the opening credits, a modification to the standard blackboard gag that regular viewers would immediately recognize as something outside the show's normal grammar. It was a quiet, specific, and genuinely affecting tribute from a show that had spent decades inside the same classroom that Edna Krabappel had occupied. Section 3. The Writer's Room, the Genius Behind the Jokes. Facts 46 through 70. Fact 46. The Simpsons Writer's Room in its golden age, roughly seasons 3 through 8, contained one of the most unusual collections of intellectual talent ever assembled for a comedy television program. Al Jean and Mike Reiss, who later ran the show as showrunners, both had Harvard mathematics backgrounds. Conan O'Brien, who would later become a talk show host, wrote for the show in its early seasons and contributed to some of its most beloved episodes. Greg Daniels, who later created The Office's American adaptation, wrote during this period. John Swartzwelder, widely considered the show's greatest individual writer by many of its own staff, was a former advertising copywriter with no formal comedy background and a working method so eccentric that he will appear in more detail shortly. Fact 47. Conan O'Brien wrote the episode Marge vs. the Monorail, which aired in January of 1993 and is consistently ranked among the greatest individual episodes the show ever produced. It was a parody of The Music Man, in which a con man arrives in Springfield and convinces the town to spend a windfall of money on a decrepit monorail instead of fixing Main Street. The episode moves at an extraordinary pace, contains some of the densest joke writing in the show's history, and includes the song Monorail, which O'Brien wrote with the composers and which has been stuck in the heads of viewers for 3 decades. O'Brien left the show shortly after to pursue the late-night position that would define his career. He has described writing for The Simpsons as among the most creatively fulfilling work he has ever done. Fact 48. John Swartzwelder wrote 59 episodes of The Simpsons, more than any other individual writer. He is legendarily reclusive, he has given almost no interviews, has no public presence, and for most of his time on the show worked from a diner booth rather than the writer's room, submitting scripts remotely. He eventually moved to a location so remote that he had to communicate with the show entirely by mail and phone. His scripts were famous for their density. They contained more jokes per page than almost any other writer's work, including jokes in the stage directions that would never be heard on screen but that made the actors and crew laugh during recording. He has also written a series of novels featuring a character named Frank Burley, which are deeply strange and very funny. Fact 49. The process of writing a Simpsons episode has always been unusually collaborative by television standards. Rather than assigning individual writers sole authorship of an episode, the show runs every script through a process of room rewrites in which the entire staff contributes. A writer might receive a story credit for an episode while knowing that a significant portion of the actual dialogue came from other people in the room. This process can be frustrating for individual egos but tends to produce more consistently polished final drafts because every joke has been tested against the response of a room full of professional comedy writers before it gets anywhere near an actor. Fact 50. The show has a tradition of running each episode through as many as a dozen full rewrites before it reaches production. The first draft of a Simpsons script is often unrecognizable by the time the episode airs. Stories have been rebuilt from scratch. Characters have been swapped out entirely. The emotional core of an episode has been completely rethought in table reads. This depth of revision is partly why the show's best episodes feel so precisely calibrated. Every joke has survived a gauntlet. The ones that made it through are the ones that could not be improved. Fact 51. The show pioneered what is now called the cold open, a brief, often entirely self-contained comedic sequence that plays before the main title sequence. These cold opens have no necessary connection to the episode that follows. They exist purely to establish a comedic tone, to do something unexpected, to make the viewer laugh within the first 30 seconds of the episode. This structure has been adopted by comedy shows across television in the decades since, but The Simpsons was among the first to use it consistently, and with such commitment to the idea that the opening could be completely disconnected from everything that followed. Fact 52. The couch gag, the sequence at the end of the opening credits in which the family races to sit on their couch and find something unexpected, began as a way to adjust the length of episodes. If an episode ran slightly short, a longer couch gag could fill the time. If an episode ran slightly long, the couch gag could be cut to almost nothing. Over time, the couch gag became its own creative space, an opportunity for the show to experiment with animation styles, to bring in guest directors, to attempt things that would be impossible within the normal grammar of a Simpsons episode. Some couch gags are among the most visually inventive things the show has ever produced, including sequences directed by Banksy, Don Hertzfeldt, and various animation legends. Fact 53. The blackboard sequence at the beginning of every episode in which Bart writes a punishment phrase repeatedly on the school chalkboard is another element that began as a length adjustment tool and became a beloved tradition. The phrases are always written specifically for the episode and sometimes reference current events, inside jokes, or tributes to people connected to the show. Fans have cataloged every blackboard gag across the show's run. The phrases range from the absurdist, "I will not sell land in Florida," does not appear in any episode but perfectly captures the grammar of the gag, to the genuinely poignant, as with the Marcia Wallace tribute mentioned earlier. Fact 54. The show's writers have included an extraordinary number of people who went on to significant careers elsewhere. Greg Daniels adapted The Office. Mike Judge, who worked adjacent to the show's orbit, created Beavis and Butthead and later Office Space and Silicon Valley. Dana Gould contributed to the show and has had a long stand-up career. Ken Keeler, who holds a PhD in mathematics from Harvard, wrote for the show and contributed to some of its most technically precise comedy. B.J. Novak, later known as an actor and writer on The Office, interned on the show. The list is long. The writer's room functioned as an incubator for a generation of American comedy talent. Fact 55. Al Jean has been the show's showrunner since season 13 and has held this position longer than any other individual in the show's history. He worked on the show in its earliest seasons, left to pursue other projects, and returned to take over leadership at a moment when the show needed stability after a period of significant creative turnover. Gene's tenure has been the subject of considerable debate among fans who feel the show's later seasons lack the density and precision of its golden age. Jean has addressed this criticism directly in various interviews, arguing that the show has always evolved and that critics who compare later seasons unfavorably to early ones are in some ways comparing the show to an idealized memory rather than to the actual episodes. Fact 56. The show has a specific policy about research writers are expected to fact-check any real-world information they include in scripts, which has led to some unexpected situations. For episodes that deal with mathematics, physics, medicine, or law, the show has brought in actual experts to consult. Homer's mathematical contribution in the episode Treehouse of Horror 6, in which Homer briefly exists in 3 dimensions, contains a real mathematical equation for the mass of the Higgs boson particle. The equation was provided by a mathematician and was correct. It appeared briefly on a chalkboard in an animated sequence and predated the experimental confirmation of the Higgs boson's mass by more than a decade. Fact 57. The episode Lisa the Vegetarian, in which Lisa stops eating meat, was written in consultation with Paul and Linda McCartney, who agreed to guest star only on the condition that Lisa remain a vegetarian for the rest of the series. The showrunners agreed, and Lisa has not eaten meat in any canonical episode since. This is one of very few cases in which a guest star's conditions have permanently altered the show's established canon in a way that has been consistently honored. The McCartney condition has held for nearly 30 years. Fact 58. The episode Dollar Springfield, which deals with a casino opening in Springfield and contains one of the show's most sustained comedic portraits of addiction and denial, was based partly on research the writers did into the actual economic and social effects of casino development on small communities. The episode is funnier than any policy paper on the subject, but the underlying observations about what happens to a town's social fabric when gambling becomes central to its economy reflect real documented patterns. The writers were always doing this grounding comedy in research, finding the specific observation beneath the general joke. Fact 59. The show has used its position to take shots at Fox, the network that airs it, with a consistency and a boldness that is nearly unprecedented in television history. Jokes about Fox's programming decisions, Fox's corporate culture, Fox News, and Rupert Murdoch appear throughout the show's run. Murdoch himself has guest starred twice. The show has depicted Fox executives as buffoons, cowards, and commercially rapacious decision-makers. The network has almost never intervened. The general understanding seems to be that The Simpsons makes enough money that it has earned the right to mock its own house, and that interfering with that freedom would be more damaging than the jokes themselves. Fact 60. Ken Keeler, the Harvard-trained mathematician, wrote an episode called The Prisoner of Benda, which aired in season 22, that contains a genuine mathematical theorem created specifically for the episode's plot. The episode involves a machine that can swap two people's minds, with the constraint that it cannot re-swap the same two people. The question the episode poses, can everyone get back into their original body, is solved by a new combinatorial theorem that Keeler wrote and proved. The theorem, now sometimes called the Futurama theorem because Keeler also worked on Futurama, is mathematically valid. An animated comedy produced a genuine original contribution to mathematics as a byproduct of a storyline about body swapping. Fact 61. The show has always maintained what the writers call a no-hugging, no-learning policy, a phrase attributed to one of the early showrunners to describe the decision that The Simpsons would not follow the standard sitcom formula in which characters learn lessons that improve their behavior. Homer does not become a better person over the course of the series. Bart does not grow up. Lisa does not find the community she deserves. The show resets after every episode, which sounds like a limitation but is actually a freedom. It means the characters never have to be burdened by their past choices, never have to become the logical conclusions of the mistakes they have made. They are always available to be themselves again. Fact 62. The writing staff has always had a tradition of outrunning their own jokes. By the time the show makes a cultural reference, the culture has often already moved past it. The staff has discussed this as a constant creative challenge. The lead time on a Simpsons episode, from conception to broadcast, is typically 6 to 8 months. A joke that is perfectly current on the day it is written may be slightly stale by the time it airs. The show's solution has been to write jokes that transcend their immediate reference point observations that work whether or not the viewer gets the specific allusion. This is harder than it sounds. Fact 63. One of the show's most interesting recurring creative choices is what fans call the act break. In a standard Simpsons episode, the act structure, the division of the episode into 3 acts separated by commercial breaks, rarely places the most important emotional beat where a conventional television writer would. The show frequently puts its most devastating or surprising moment in the middle of an act rather than at a break, which creates a kind of narrative unpredictability that keeps viewers off balance. You never quite know when the show is going to gut punch you. Fact 64. The episode Bart Gets an F, which aired in the 2nd season, was the first episode to achieve a truly massive Nielsen rating. It was watched by over 33 million viewers on its original broadcast, making it one of the most watched television events of the year. It is also one of the show's most emotionally genuine episodes. Bart, facing the very real possibility of being held back a year, studies desperately and still fails his history test. He sits at his desk and cries real tears. It is a moment that the show did not soften with a joke, did not undercut with irony. It just let him cry. The episode remains one of the best arguments for the show's capacity for genuine emotional weight. Fact 65. George Meyer, another Harvard graduate, is often described by colleagues as the single most influential writer in the show's history who has never been a showrunner. His contributions both to specific scripts and to the general sensibility of the show are credited by multiple former colleagues as foundational. He was known for pushing every joke further than seemed reasonable, for refusing to accept a funny idea when a funnier idea might exist with a little more work, and for a kind of moral seriousness about comedy that treated the work as something that mattered. He was also known for practicing what he called going to the dark place, finding the genuinely uncomfortable observation beneath the comfortable joke. Fact 66. The show's music has always been handled by Alf Clausen, who scored the series from its 2nd season through season 28 and composed music for over 500 episodes. Clausen worked with a live orchestra, which was unusual. Most animated shows of the era used synthesized music or needle drops. The live orchestration gave the show a warmth and specificity that contributed significantly to its emotional texture. When Clausen was replaced by a different composer in season 29, a decision made for budgetary reasons, it generated significant controversy among fans who felt the change was audible and represented a loss of something important. Fact 67. The show has used the technique of visual storytelling comedy delivered through background details that the camera lingers on only briefly, visible only to viewers paying close attention more extensively than almost any other animated series. Signs on storefronts, headlines on newspapers visible for a single frame, background conversations you can almost but not quite hear, details on book spines, names on gravestones, all of it is written and drawn with the same care as the foreground dialogue. The show rewards obsessive watching in a way that few shows of any kind do. Fact 68. The Simpsons has won more Emmy Awards for Outstanding Animated Program than any other show in history. Its Emmy totals include multiple wins in other categories, including guest performance nominations and wins for voice acting. The show's relationship with awards has been complex. It won consistently in its peak years and has continued to receive nominations long after critics began arguing that the show's best work was behind it. Whether this reflects the show's continued quality or the inertia of institutional recognition is a question that reasonable people disagree about. Fact 69. The show's writing has always included what the staff calls sprinkles, small jokes and references placed throughout a script that are not essential to the story but that reward attentive viewers. Many of these are never intended to be widely noticed. They exist for the pleasure of the people who do notice them, and their presence is a signal that the show is made by people who take craft seriously even in the corners. The culture of the sprinkle of caring about the quality of the work even in places where no one will see is one of the defining characteristics of The Simpsons at its best. Fact 70. The episode Cape Fear, a parody of Cape Fear in which Sideshow Bob is released from prison and stalks the Simpson family, contains one of the most celebrated individual comedy sequences in the show's history. Bob, having trapped the family on a houseboat, is stalled from actually harming anyone because Bart asks him to sing the entire score of the HMS Pinafore. Bob does, in full, because his theatrical ego cannot resist the invitation. The sequence runs much longer than any equivalent scene in a standard television comedy would. It runs until it becomes genuinely strange, until it crosses through funny and out the other side into something almost hypnotic, and then it delivers its punchline. It is a masterclass in how long you can hold a comedic premise before the length itself becomes the joke. Section 4. Springfield itself, the town that shouldn't exist. Fact 71 through 95. Fact 71. Springfield's official population has never been consistently established. Various episodes have cited figures ranging from a few thousand to several 100,000, depending on what the story requires. The show treats Springfield's scale as elastic, small enough to feel intimate, large enough to contain everything from a professional baseball team to a harbor to a volcano. The inconsistency is intentional and functional. Springfield is whatever size it needs to be in any given episode, because Springfield is a feeling as much as a place. Fact 72. The Springfield nuclear power plant is designated as a 2-unit pressurized water reactor facility. This is a real type of nuclear plant, and the show's writers did genuine research into how such a facility operates, what its safety requirements are, and what the consequences of specific types of failures would be. Much of this research was then used to make the plant's violations more precisely horrifying. When the show mentions specific malfunctions, cracked cooling towers, improper waste disposal, contaminated groundwater, these are not invented details. They are drawn from documented incidents at real nuclear facilities. Fact 73. Moe's Tavern, where Homer and his friends drink, was based on a composite of several real bars in Portland, Oregon, that Groening frequented in his youth. The particular atmosphere, dark, slightly sticky, presided over by a deeply unhappy man who, nonetheless, keeps the place running through some combination of inertia and stubbornness, is a recognizable American archetype. Moe Sislak himself, voiced by Hank Azaria, was originally based on Rich Hall, a comedian known for his character Sniglets, but evolved into something more specific and more melancholy over time. Moe's existential despair, his loneliness, his failed attempts at self-improvement, his occasional flashes of unexpected decency makes him one of the show's most genuinely sad figures. Fact 74. The Quick E-Mart, Springfield's convenience store, was based on the 7-Eleven chain, which was extremely familiar to Groening growing up in the Pacific Northwest. In 2007, to promote the Simpsons movie, 12 actual 7-Eleven stores across North America were temporarily converted into Quick E-Marts. They carried Squishies, Buzz Cola, Krusty-O's, and other fictional products rendered into real consumables. The promotion was one of the most ambitious real-world marketing tie-ins in movie history and generated significant media coverage. People waited in long lines to buy a squishy. The show had become so embedded in popular culture that its fictional products had genuine market value. Fact 75. Springfield's geography includes both a gorge, Springfield Gorge, made famous by the episode Bart the Daredevil, in which Homer attempts and catastrophically fails to jump it on a skateboard, and a butte, a harbor, a river, mountains visible in the background, and what appears to be a significant stretch of coastline depending on the episode. No single American city has this combination of geographic features within reasonable proximity. Springfield's landscape is assembled from impressions rather than drawn from any specific place, which is precisely why it feels simultaneously familiar and impossible. Fact 76. The Springfield Gorge sequence in Bart the Daredevil is considered one of the greatest sustained physical comedy sequences in the show's history. Homer, having talked Bart out of attempting the jump, decides he will do it himself, not out of bravery but out of Homer-specific logic that is almost impossible to argue against in the moment. He fails to clear the gorge, hits the cliff, bounces down it in stages, lands at the bottom, gets airlifted to a hospital, falls out of the gurney, rolls down another hill, and crashes into a tree. The sequence takes nearly 3 minutes and never loses momentum. It was storyboarded with obsessive care by the animation team and remains a technical achievement in physical comedy animation. Fact 77. Shelbyville, the neighboring town that exists as Springfield's eternal rival, was named for Isaac Shelby, a historical figure associated with Tennessee. The show uses the Springfield-Shelbyville rivalry to explore a particular kind of small-town parochialism, the way communities define themselves against their nearest neighbors, rather than against any objective standard. The episode Lemon of Troy, in which Bart leads a group of Springfield kids on a mission to recover a stolen lemon tree from Shelbyville, is one of the show's most committed explorations of this dynamic. It treats the stakes of the lemon tree theft with the seriousness of a diplomatic incident, which is exactly the right approach. Fact 78. The First Church of Springfield, where Reverend Lovejoy preaches and Ned Flanders worships with total commitment, is a non-denominational Protestant institution. The show has always been careful to present Christianity through the lens of a specific American evangelical Protestant tradition without committing to any particular denomination, which allows it to critique the cultural phenomena associated with organized religion in America without targeting any specific church. Reverend Lovejoy himself, voiced by Harry Shearer, is a wonderful portrait of a man who entered the clergy with genuine vocation and had it entirely exhausted by 30 years of dealing with Ned Flanders. Fact 79. Springfield Elementary has been depicted with its own internal geography so extensively that fans have created floor plans of the building. Principal Skinner's office, Edna Krabappel's classroom, the cafeteria, the gymnasium, the hallways with their lockers, all of these spaces have consistent details that recur across hundreds of episodes. The cafeteria's menu items are a running joke. The food described is reliably terrible in specific ways. The gym teacher has no established name in most references and appears primarily as a figure of athletic authority with no inner life. The show's ability to make Springfield Elementary feel like a real place, with a real institutional culture and real social dynamics, is part of why it resonates with viewers who spent their own childhoods inside buildings that felt exactly like this. Fact 80. The Springfield Retirement Castle, where Grandpa Simpson lives, is a portrait of elder neglect so specific and so consistently realized that it functions as a sustained piece of social commentary across the entire run of the show. The staff are indifferent. The conditions are poor. The residents are treated as burdens rather than people. The show never dwells on this or editorializes about it. It just presents the retirement castle as it is, with the same matter-of-fact directness it brings to the nuclear plant or the corrupt police department. The accumulation of detail over decades creates something more devastating than any single episode focused on the subject could achieve. Fact 81. The show's take on Springfield's political system, Mayor Quimby, the corrupt, Kennedy-esque mayor who is transparently self-interested and entirely indifferent to the actual welfare of the town's residents, has been cited by political scientists as a surprisingly effective satire of machine politics. Quimby's combination of casual corruption, performative civic authority, and personal cowardice is so consistently realized that the character functions as a kind of template for a certain type of American municipal political figure. Dan Castellaneta's Kennedy impression deployed for Quimby is precise enough to be recognizable while being sufficiently exaggerated to function as comedy rather than impression. Fact 82. The Springfield Police Department, led by Chief Clancy Wiggum, is portrayed as comprehensively incompetent. Wiggum does not understand the law in any functional sense. His officers are indifferent to actual crime while being enthusiastic about minor municipal violations. Evidence is routinely mishandled, ignored, or fabricated. The department's failures function as comedy, but also as a consistent representation of a specific systemic problem. Police forces in small American towns that are essentially accountability-free because the community's alternatives are limited. Springfield needs the police. Springfield cannot hold the police accountable. Springfield makes its peace with this. Fact 83. The Springfield Tire Fire, a pile of tires that has been burning for years somewhere outside of town, is referenced so casually and so frequently that it has become one of the show's most beloved background details. Nobody is trying to put it out. Nobody seems particularly alarmed by it. It is simply there, burning, generating a column of black smoke that appears in the distance in several establishing shots of the town. The tire fire is Springfield's relationship with environmental catastrophe reduced to its most essential visual form. Fact 84. Springfield has a monorail that was installed as the result of a con in the episode Marge versus the Monorail. The monorail ran once, nearly destroyed the town, and was subsequently abandoned. It appears in the background of various Springfield establishing shots as a rusted, non-operational structure. The show treats its continued presence as entirely unremarkable. Springfield simply built an unsafe monorail because a con man convinced them to. It nearly killed everyone, and now it sits there deteriorating as a monument to collective gullibility. The show never needs to comment on this. The image says everything. Fact 85. The town of Springfield has been destroyed and rebuilt an indeterminate number of times across the show's run. It has been burned, flooded, invaded, sealed under a dome, struck by comets, subjected to tornado damage, and overrun by various animal populations. After each of these events, the town returns to its normal configuration by the next episode without any acknowledged reconstruction effort. The show has occasionally addressed this directly, the episode The Principal and the Pauper being the most explicit examination of how Springfield processes institutional trauma, but mostly it simply allows the town to reset, which is either a cartoon convention or something darker, depending on how seriously you take it. Fact 86. The Simpsons movie, released in 2007, was in development for approximately 18 years before it reached theaters. Matt Groening and the producers had discussed making a Simpsons film almost since the show began, but the project was repeatedly postponed because, as various people involved have explained, the incentive to make a film decreased each time the show was renewed. Why make a movie when the show is still running? The eventual film, in which Homer's environmental recklessness leads to Springfield being sealed under an EPA dome and the family having to escape to Alaska, grossed over $536 million worldwide against a budget of approximately $75 million. It was a substantial commercial success, though critical opinion on whether it captured the show's best qualities was divided. Fact 87. Springfield's climate is demonstrably impossible. The town has experienced blizzards, tropical heat waves, extended droughts, flooding, earthquakes, and tornado events across the course of the series. No single American municipality experiences all of these weather patterns. The show's writers have occasionally acknowledged this within the text. Characters have noted Springfield's meteorological strangeness, but mostly the climate is simply whatever the episode requires it to be, which is another dimension in which Springfield refuses to be locatable on any actual map. Fact 88. The animal population of Springfield includes a three-eyed fish, luminous rats, regular appearances from alligators and bears, a full gorilla population at the Springfield Zoo, and the Simpson family's various pets over the years. Santa's little helper, the Greyhound, has been with the family since the very first episode and has had more storylines, more emotional weight, and more personality development than many human supporting characters. The family cat, Snowball, has died and been replaced several times, with each replacement maintaining the name Snowball despite being a different animal. The show treats this as a perfectly logical solution to the problem of a child's grief. Fact 89. The Simpsons house at 740 Evergreen Terrace has a floor plan that is, by the internal logic of the show, physically impossible. Rooms appear and disappear between episodes. The basement is sometimes vast and sometimes non-existent. The attic has been used as a set in some episodes and been absent as a concept in others. The garage has served as Homer's recording studio, a barber shop, a daycare center, and a simple parking space for a car that is never seen elsewhere. The show's production designers have openly acknowledged that the house's geography is intentionally flexible. It is whatever the episode needs, rather than a consistent architectural space. Fact 90. The show has a rich tradition of signage comedy jokes delivered entirely through the text on signs visible in the background of shots. These signs are written by specific members of the writing staff, whose job includes populating Springfield's visual landscape with material that rewards attention. Springfield's businesses have included Toys Were Us, the Legitimate Businessman's Social Club, Guns and Diapers, For the Discriminating Parent, Bloodbath and Beyond, and the Adult Education Annex, where the course listing has included topics ranging from the practical to the existential. These details cost the show almost nothing and contribute enormously to the sense that Springfield is a fully realized place. Fact 91. The Springfield Zoo has been depicted as both a genuine attraction and a site of institutional neglect. Animals are inadequately housed, some animals appear to be dead, the staff seem largely indifferent to the welfare of the creatures in their care. This is consistent with the show's general portrait of Springfield's public institutions. They exist, they function at the most minimal acceptable level, and nobody is particularly invested in improving them, because improvement would require effort and accountability, and Springfield has structured itself around the avoidance of both. Fact 92. Krusty Burger, the fast food chain named after Krusty the Clown, has been depicted serving food of genuinely alarming composition. Various episodes have revealed that Krusty Burger uses meat of uncertain origin, maintains kitchen conditions that would fail any reasonable health inspection, and has caused documented health emergencies in Springfield's population. It remains the town's most popular restaurant. The relationship between Krusty Burger's documented dangers and Springfield's continued enthusiasm for it is one of the show's most consistent observations about the human capacity to choose comfort over self-interest. Fact 93. The Shelbyville conflict reaches its most interesting dimension in the episode The City of New York vs. Homer Simpson, which aired in the 9th season and is famous primarily for being pulled from syndication after September 11, 2001, because of its extended sequence set at the World Trade Center. The episode was kept off air for years. When it returned to syndication, it had become something different, a document of a specific pre-September 11th American cultural moment that had been sealed in amber by the tragedy that followed it. Fact 94. Springfield's schools include Springfield Elementary, where Bart and Lisa attend, and Springfield University, where Homer briefly enrolled as an adult student. The university episode Homer Goes to College, written by Conan O'Brien, is a sustained parody of the college movie genre, with Homer arriving with expectations shaped entirely by Animal House and finding an institution that does not remotely resemble his fantasy. The nuclear physics professors are competent and hardworking. The campus does not have a toga party in progress. The nerds are kind and accommodating. Homer's disappointment that college is a place of actual learning rather than anarchic adventure is pure Homer. Fact 95. The Squidport, Springfield's waterfront entertainment district, was introduced in a later season as evidence that Springfield did in fact have a coastline regardless of the town's geographic inconsistencies. The Squidport contains a mix of upscale shops and entertainments that feel slightly incongruous in a town that has always been portrayed as firmly working class. Its presence represents one of the ways the show has gradually expanded Springfield's scale, as it has needed new locations for stories, occasionally creating tensions with the blue-collar authenticity that defined the town in its early seasons. Section 5. Guest stars, the stories behind the cameos. Facts 96 through 120. Fact 96. The Simpsons has featured more celebrity guest stars than any other animated series in television history, and arguably more than any other scripted series of any kind. Over the show's 36 seasons, hundreds of actors, musicians, athletes, politicians, scientists, authors, and cultural figures have appeared. The show established early on that celebrity appearances should be used purposefully. Guests were not supposed to simply show up as themselves and be admired. They were supposed to be integrated into stories in ways that used their public persona as comedic material. Fact 97. Michael Jackson voiced a character named Leon Kompowski in the Season 3 episode Stark Raving Dad. The character was a large white man who believed he was Michael Jackson. Jackson provided the speaking voice himself, but, at his own insistence, was credited under the pseudonym John J. Smith. He did not sing in the episode. A sound-alike was hired for the musical sequences. The episode is one of the show's most beloved and contains a song called Happy Birthday, Lisa, that is, within the context of the episode, genuinely touching. Jackson's involvement was kept secret for years, and only confirmed publicly after his death in 2009. Fact 98. Dustin Hoffman voiced a character named Mr. Bergstrom, Lisa's substitute teacher, in the Season 2 episode Lisa's Substitute. Hoffman was also credited under a pseudonym Sam Ettick. Mr. Bergstrom is one of the show's most beloved one-episode characters, a teacher who sees Lisa's intelligence and takes it seriously, who tells her she matters, who gives her a note before he leaves that simply says, "You are Lisa Simpson." The episode is heartbreaking in a very specific way. It is about what it means to encounter a person who fully sees you, and then to have to watch them leave. Lisa handles it with less grace than she would like, which is entirely the point. Fact 99. Leonard Nimoy appeared in the show twice, most memorably as himself in the episode Marge vs. the Monorail, where he is invited to Springfield to inaugurate the new monorail and finds himself caught in the inevitable chaos that follows. His final appearance in the episode, a brief non-sequitur moment where he appears to simply teleport away, was improvised. The writers had not figured out how to get him out of the episode, and Nimoy suggested he could simply disappear. The writers agreed immediately. It is one of the episode's funniest individual moments. Fact 100. Stephen Hawking appeared on the show 4 times, more than almost any other guest. He voiced a version of himself who was, within the show's universe, a personal friend of Professor Frink and a regular visitor to Springfield. Hawking has said in various contexts that he found the show's portrayal of him amusing rather than offensive. The show treated him as a person with a full personality rather than simply as a symbol of scientific genius, and he responded to that. His appearances include a scene in which he reveals that his wheelchair contains a fist that springs out to punch people who challenge his ideas, which Hawking delivered with evident delight. Fact 101. Johnny Cash voiced a coyote spirit that guides Homer on a vision quest in the Season 8 episode El Viaje Misterioso de Nuestro Homer. The episode is one of the show's most visually distinctive. The vision sequence is drawn in an unusual style, with flat colors and dreamlike compositions. Cash's voice, which carries an unmistakable combination of warmth and gravity, was the perfect choice for a character who is simultaneously mystical and plain-spoken. Cash agreed to the role without hesitation. The episode is regularly cited as one of the show's finest single episodes. Fact 102. Paul and Linda McCartney, as noted earlier, appeared in the episode Lisa the Vegetarian. Paul McCartney also co-wrote the song Maybe I'm Amazed for the episode, a vegetarian-themed rewrite of the original song, and insisted it only be played over the end credits in a way that was easily missable, which, given that it was an original McCartney recording, was an unusual piece of restraint. The McCartney appearance was significant not just because of the permanence of the vegetarian condition it imposed on Lisa, but because it demonstrated that the show could attract genuine cultural icons and handle their presence with dignity and wit. Fact 103. Ringo Starr appeared in the episode Brush with Greatness, in which Marge discovers she had painted a portrait of Ringo as a teenager and sent it to him with a fan letter. Ringo, in the episode, turns out to have kept every fan letter he ever received, and is methodically working through them to reply to each one. His character, an earnest, kind man trying to be decent to every person who ever cared about his work, is played entirely straight, and the joke is that the premise is not presented as absurd. There is something sweet about the idea that Ringo Starr is just quietly doing his best. Fact 104. Tony Hawk appeared in the show during a skateboarding-related episode and provided, by his own account, one of his least demanding performances since the script required him primarily to acknowledge Bart's skateboarding ability. Hawk has said he is a genuine fan of the show and accepted the appearance because it was The Simpsons, which is the most common reason celebrities have given for accepting the invitation over the decades. The cachet of having appeared on The Simpsons has been, for much of the show's history, a specific kind of cultural validation that is difficult to articulate but universally recognized. Fact 105. The episode Homer vs. Patty and Selma features a subplot involving Patty and Selma's work at the DMV, and includes brief appearances by several minor celebrity figures in the queue. The background celebrity cameos in Simpsons episodes are often as carefully constructed as the featured appearances. Specific people are placed in specific contexts to make specific observations about their cultural position. The show has always been more sophisticated about the use of recognizable figures than a simple famous person makes a joke about themselves formula would suggest. Fact 106. Tom Jones appeared in the episode Marge Gets a Job and delivered a performance so committed to the bit, playing a version of himself as a slightly desperate cabaret performer brought in to entertain the nuclear plant staff, that the show's writers have described it as one of the more unexpectedly funny recordings in the show's history. Jones's willingness to be ridiculous while maintaining complete professional dignity is a combination that the show's format rewards enormously. Fact 107. Beck appeared in the episode Homer Palooza, which is set at a touring music festival and includes several major musical acts of the mid-1990s. The episode is a document of a specific cultural moment, the peak of the alternative rock era, that feels both precise and slightly elegiac in retrospect. Homer, realizing he is completely out of touch with the music his children care about, attempts to engage and finds that the world has moved without him. It is one of the show's most pointed examinations of middle age and cultural obsolescence. Fact 108. James Brown appeared in the show during a sequence involving a gospel choir and delivered, by all accounts, an absolutely full-throated performance in the recording studio. The show's music producers have described recording sessions with Brown as genuinely extraordinary. He came in prepared, committed, and brought an intensity to a minor animated cameo that would have been appropriate for a live performance at a major venue. Brown appears to have treated every piece of work as worthy of his full capability. The recording from that session bears this out. Fact 109. Kelsey Grammer, who voices Sideshow Bob, was one of the first guest performers to become a recurring presence on the show, rather than a one-time visitor. His commitment to the role and his evident enjoyment of it led to Bob being brought back repeatedly across dozens of episodes over multiple decades. Grammer has described Sideshow Bob as the character he has played the longest in any medium, having portrayed Bob across more years than Frasier Crane, the role he is most publicly associated with. Fact 110. The episode featuring Alec Baldwin and Kim Basinger, who were married at the time of the recording, aired during a period when the show was experimenting with having couples play opposite each other. The experience of recording with the two of them together in the booth was described by the show's directors as unusual. The dynamic between the performers in the room created something that could not have been achieved with either of them performing alone. It is one of the more interesting technical observations about voice performance in animation. Fact 111. Tito Puente, the legendary Latin jazz musician, appeared in the episode Who Shot Mr. Burns, providing both a voice performance and original music. His musical contribution to the episode included a song that served as his character's alibi, a samba about channeling his rage into music rather than violence. Puente performed the song with the same musicianship he brought to his concert recordings. It is not the most prominent moment in a celebrated two-part episode, but it is one of the most musically generous. Fact 112. David Duchovny and Gillian Anderson reprised their X-Files characters, Fox Mulder and Dana Scully, in the episode The Springfield Files, in which Homer's encounter with a glowing figure in the woods leads to an FBI investigation. The episode was made at the height of the X-Files' popularity and functions as a sustained and affectionate parody of the show. Duchovny and Anderson's performances are perfectly calibrated. They play Mulder and Scully with just enough exaggeration to register as parody, while remaining recognizably the characters rather than cartoon versions of them. Fact 113. Meryl Streep guest starred as Bart's girlfriend Jessica Lovejoy in the episode Bart's Girlfriend. Streep voiced the character under the pseudonym Princess Cashmere. No, wait. Streep voiced the character under her own name. Jessica Lovejoy is Reverend Lovejoy's daughter, presented as angelic on the surface and genuinely manipulative beneath, who briefly captures Bart's heart before revealing herself to be capable of significantly worse behavior than Bart himself. Streep's casting is a joke in itself. The most respected actress in American film, playing a character whose primary quality is being better than Bart at being bad. Fact 114. Winona Ryder voiced the character Allison Taylor, a transfer student who threatens Lisa's status as Springfield Elementary's most gifted student. The episode Stark Raving Dad? No, wait. The episode Lisa's Rival features Allison as Lisa's intellectual competition, and Ryder plays her with a combination of genuine warmth and competitive edge that makes Allison feel like a real child rather than a plot device. The episode is one of the show's most honest examinations of Lisa's psychology, her fear of not being the smartest person in the room, her difficulty celebrating other people's achievements. Fact 115. The episode in which Homer joins the Stonecutters Springfield's version of the Freemasons features Patrick Stewart as the group's leader, number 1. Stewart has said he agreed to the role in part because he found the script's treatment of secret societies genuinely funny. The joke being that the Stonecutters are both enormously powerful and fundamentally petty, spending their considerable resources on concerns like keeping Steve Martin's royalty checks delayed and maintaining their advantage in the Olympics. Stewart's natural authority made number 1 genuinely imposing, which made the pettiness of the Stonecutters' actual agenda funnier. Fact 116. Johnny Unitas, the legendary NFL quarterback, appeared in a flashback episode involving football, and his performance was, by the show's production staff's assessment, one of the more awkward celebrity recordings in the show's history. Athletes, as a general category, tend to be less comfortable in the recording booth than performers who have spent their careers communicating through language. The results vary. Some athletes surprise the show with their ease and comic timing. Others are clearly uncomfortable, and the show must work around the limitations of the performance during post-production. This is not a criticism so much as an observation about the particular skills that voice performance requires. Fact 117. The show's approach to celebrity cameos has become more self-conscious and meta over the decades, as the tradition of Simpsons celebrity appearances has become part of the show's established cultural identity. Later appearances are sometimes structured around the fact that the viewer knows this is a Simpsons guest appearance. The joke is partly that the celebrity is doing what celebrities do on The Simpsons. This creates a kind of reflexive loop that the show navigates with varying degrees of grace. The best later cameos are aware of the convention without being dominated by it. Fact 118. Werner Herzog appeared in the show and delivered a performance so completely committed to the specific quality of Werner Herzog that it functioned almost as an act of self-parody, except that Herzog appears incapable of self-parody in any meaningful sense. He simply is Werner Herzog, always, everywhere, including inside an animated comedy about a yellow family. His voice, his cadences, his philosophical gravity applied to entirely inappropriate subject matter. It worked because Herzog is genuinely incapable of performing anything other than himself, and himself is, in any context, compelling. Fact 119. The show has always made a distinction between celebrities who appear as themselves, usually in ways that gently mock their public image, and celebrities who appear as characters. The latter tend to produce the more interesting results. When a performer steps into a Simpsons character and commits to it as a performance rather than an appearance, the show tends to reward that commitment with richer material. The best Simpsons guest performances are acting jobs, not appearances. Fact 120. The tradition of celebrity cameos on the show has, in more recent seasons, expanded to include a wider range of public figures from outside entertainment scientists, economists, tech figures, athletes, from non-American sports traditions. This reflects a broadening of the show's cultural reference range, as its audience has become more global. The show is watched in territories around the world, and the casting of guests increasingly acknowledges this global audience rather than assuming exclusively American cultural fluency. Section 6. Production Secrets, Animation, Recording, and Craft. Facts 121 through 145. Fact 121. Every episode of The Simpsons takes approximately 8 to 9 months to produce from initial concept to final broadcast. The process begins in the writer's room, where stories are pitched, developed, and broken. Scripts go through multiple drafts. Table reads are held. Revisions follow. Once a script is locked, it goes to the storyboard artists, then to the animating studios for most of the show's history. The actual animation has been produced in South Korea, with Korean animation studios producing the finished frames based on detailed storyboards created in Los Angeles. The completed animation is then returned for post-production, including music recording, sound design, and final editing. Fact 122. The cast records their lines individually rather than together. Unlike some animated shows where the cast performs together in a room and plays off each other's energy, The Simpsons principals typically record in separate sessions. The director who attends each session works with each actor individually to achieve the right performance. The process requires the actors to perform opposite silence to react to lines they cannot hear, to build relationships with characters they cannot see. The cast has done this for so long that the isolation of the recording booth has become second nature. Fact 123. Dan Castellaneta typically records Homer's lines in a manner that involves significant physical commitment. He has described the Homer voice as something that requires his whole body. The expression on his face changes, his posture shifts. He has said that if you watch him in the recording booth through the glass, he looks like Homer. Not exactly, but in the way that a skilled impressionist inhabits their subject, the body follows the voice into the character. This physical commitment is invisible to the audience but registers somehow in the performance. Fact 124. The show switched from standard definition to high-definition production, beginning with Season 20, which aired in 2008. The transition involved a significant redesign of various visual elements, including the aspect ratio of the show widening from the traditional 4:3 format to the 16:9 widescreen format that has become standard. This change has had practical consequences. Background artists had to reimagine Springfield's visual landscape for a wider frame, and details that had previously been outside the visible area of the screen had to be populated with content. Springfield became, in a precise visual sense, a bigger place. Fact 125. The show's color palette, the specific shade of yellow used for the character's skin, the particular orange of Homer's shirt, the blue of Marge's hair has been carefully maintained across decades and across different production studios. The yellow, in particular, was a subject of significant early debate. Groening wanted a shade that would be unmistakably artificial, not the yellow of anything in nature, but specifically and recognizably cartoon yellow. The result was a color so specific that it is now essentially synonymous with the show. When you see that yellow, you know where you are. Fact 126. The show's opening sequence, in which various Springfield residents are seen going about their business before the family converges on the couch, has been updated multiple times to reflect changes in the show's technology, changes in Springfield's established population, and changes in the cultural landscape. In the original sequence, the animation style and the specific background details reflect the early 90s production context. In the HD version, everything is rendered with significantly more detail, and additional characters have been added to the background. The sequence now contains more Springfield residents than the entire town's population was sometimes suggested to include. Fact 127. The recording sessions for the show are notable for the latitude they give performers. The directors tend to encourage actors to try multiple versions of a line, to go in unexpected directions, to find something in a reading that was not on the page. This is why certain Simpsons line deliveries have a quality that feels slightly unpredictable, like the actor has found something in the moment that the script did not fully anticipate. Castellaneta has described leaving sessions not always knowing which take will end up in the broadcast episode. Fact 128. The show's sound design, the specific quality of Springfield's ambient noise, the sound effects associated with recurring situations, the musical stings that punctuate comedic beats was established in the earliest seasons and has been maintained with remarkable consistency. Certain sound effects have been used in essentially every episode. The sound of a door opening and closing in the Simpson house is always the same. The sound of Homer's car has a specific quality. These small consistencies are part of what makes Springfield feel like a real place, even though it is made of painted cells or, more recently, digital files. Fact 129. The show employs what the production staff calls a box of tricks, a set of recurring visual gags, character reactions, and camera moves that have been established over decades and can be deployed in new contexts. Homer's scream falling into a hole, the shot of the Springfield skyline at sunset, the family falling asleep simultaneously. These recurring visual patterns create a kind of visual grammar that regular viewers recognize without necessarily being consciously aware of. The grammar makes the show feel fluent even in episodes that are doing something new. Fact 130. The show's overseas animation studios have changed multiple times over the decades. Klasky Supo worked with Korean studios for its animation. Film Roman, which took over from Season 4, developed relationships with different Korean partners. The quality of the animation has fluctuated over the years in ways that fans can identify if they watch carefully. Certain seasons have animation that feels slightly off, slightly different from the established visual standard, which typically reflects a transition period with an animation partner or a budget pressure that reduced the time available for quality checking. Fact 131. The show's scripts are legendary within the industry for their density. A standard Simpsons script typically contains significantly more pages of material than would fit into the episode's runtime, because the writers know that the editing process will compress and accelerate the pacing. The scripts are also notable for the quality of the stage directions. The descriptions of action and visual gags are written with a wit and specificity that makes them worth reading as documents in their own right, even though the stage directions will never be heard by the audience. Fact 132. The show employs a specific type of pacing that the production team calls the long walk, a technique in which a character is given an unusual amount of time to move from one point to another, during which the camera observes them in a way that allows a joke to develop slowly. The long walk technique works because animation can sustain a single gag longer than live-action comedy typically can without losing the audience. The audience is willing to wait for a punchline in animation in a way they might not be willing to wait in a different format, and the best Simpsons comedy exploits this willingness. Fact 133. The show's writers' rooms have always maintained a tradition of keeping a physical board where story ideas are tracked across the season. Color-coded cards represent different episodes in different stages of development. The board allows the showrunner and producers to see at a glance which episodes are ready to move forward, which are struggling, and whether the season as a whole is balanced in tone and subject matter. This physical, visible planning process is described by former staff members as one of the reasons the show has been able to maintain such a high output over such a long period. Fact 134. The Treehouse of Horror episodes, the annual Halloween specials, are produced on a parallel track from the regular episodes and allow significantly more freedom than the show's standard format permits. Characters can die. The rules of Springfield's established reality can be suspended entirely. The show can engage with horror, science fiction, and dark fantasy in ways that would be impossible to justify within the main continuity. The Treehouse episodes have produced some of the show's most inventive visual sequences and some of its most darkly funny ideas, precisely because the format's built-in permission structure lets the writers go further than they otherwise would. Fact 135. The show's casting director has maintained ongoing relationships with a network of voice actors who populate the non-featured roles in each episode. Springfield is full of characters who speak only occasionally, background residents, minor officials, one-time figures who appear in a single scene, and these are voiced by a rotating cast of professional voice actors who work across the animation industry. The discipline and professionalism these performers bring to small roles is part of what makes Springfield feel fully inhabited. No voice in a Simpsons episode, however brief, sounds like it was phoned in. Fact 136. The writers are required to be in the building during recording sessions, available to provide alternate lines or context if a director needs them. This proximity of writers to production is unusual in television, where writing and production often function as separated disciplines with limited direct communication. In the Simpsons model, the writers are present throughout, which means the material can be refined right up to the point of final recording. Lines can be improved, jokes can be replaced, entire approaches to a scene can be reconsidered between the first read and the final take. Fact 137. The music for each episode is scored after the animation is locked. Alf Clausen and later his successor would see the finished animation and compose music that responded specifically to what was on screen, rather than writing to a description of scenes that had not yet been animated. This process produces a more precise musical relationship between image and sound than is typically possible in animation production, where music is often written to descriptions rather than to finished visuals. Fact 138. The couch gags have become increasingly elaborate in later seasons. Early couch gags were simple: the family arrives, something unexpected is on the couch, end of sequence. Later couch gags have extended to several minutes, told complete short stories, engaged with other animation traditions, and been directed by notable figures from outside the show's regular creative team. The Banksy couch gag aired in 2010 and directed by the anonymous street artist, depicted the show's production process in the most unflattering terms imaginable, with overseas animation workers laboring in sweatshop conditions, and aired on the very network that produces the show. It was a remarkable act of self-criticism authorized by the people being criticized. Fact 139. The show's archive, the complete collection of scripts, storyboards, character designs, production materials, and recordings from all 36 seasons, is housed in various facilities associated with Fox. The volume of material is extraordinary. Tens of thousands of documents, hundreds of thousands of individual frames of animation, decades of audio recordings. The archive represents one of the most comprehensive records of a single cultural artifact in American entertainment history. Fact 140. The show's pilot episode, Some Enchanted Evening, which ultimately aired as the final episode of the first season after being repaired, is technically the oldest completed Simpsons episode in terms of its production date, even though it was not the first to be broadcast. Watching it now reveals how dramatically the visual language of the show changed between its earliest produced episodes and the ones that actually introduced the series to the public. The repaired version that aired still shows signs of the original animation issues in certain frames, if you know what to look for. Fact 141. The show has never used a laugh track. This was a deliberate decision from the earliest stages of production, and it was, in the late 1980s, a somewhat unusual choice for a primetime comedy of any kind. The absence of a laugh track means the audience must make its own determination about what is funny. It means the show must earn its laughs through the quality of the material, rather than through audio cues that tell the viewer when to respond. It also means watching The Simpsons is a different sensory experience from watching most of its contemporaries, quieter and more self-contained, requiring more from the viewer. Fact 142. Voice director Donna Grillo has been part of the show's production for many years, working with the cast during recording sessions and playing a significant role in shaping the performances that end up in broadcast episodes. Voice directors are often the least visible but most important figures in an animated production. They are the people in the room when the performance happens, making real-time decisions about what works and what needs to be tried again. The consistency of the show's voice performances across decades owes a great deal to the institutional memory that experienced voice directors carry. Fact 143. The show has used digital production tools since the mid-1990s, with the transition from traditional cell animation to digital animation happening gradually across the show's run. The digital transition allowed for greater visual complexity and consistency, but also changed the texture of the animation in ways that fans can identify. The traditional cell process had slight irregularities that gave the animation a specific organic quality. Digital animation is cleaner and more precise. Whether the trade-off was worth it is a question that animation enthusiasts continue to debate. Fact 144. The show's production designer, Richard Sakai, has been associated with the show since its earliest days and has played a central role in establishing and maintaining Springfield's visual consistency. The production design of Springfield, the specific architecture of the town's buildings, the visual logic of the landscape, the internal logic of recurring locations represents an enormous body of creative work that functions largely invisibly. The audience does not consciously notice production design when it is working well. They simply feel at home. Fact 145. The show has produced 23 Treehouse of Horror specials to date, each containing 3 short horror-themed segments. The tradition began in Season 2 with the intention of allowing the show to tell stories that were impossible within the regular format. The specials have engaged with virtually every major horror film tradition, from classic Universal monsters to Stephen King adaptations to contemporary psychological horror. Some of the most darkly inventive comedy the show has ever produced has appeared in Treehouse of Horror episodes, where the suspension of normal rules creates genuine freedom. Section 7. The cultural footprint, how The Simpsons changed the world. Facts 146 through 165. Fact 146. The Simpsons changed the economics of voice acting in American animation. Before the show, animated voice performers were typically paid relatively modest rates. Animation was considered a lesser format than live action, and voice work was not accorded the same prestige as on-screen performance. The show's success and the public recognition of its cast as genuine performers of significant talent began a shift in how voice actors were valued and compensated. The principal cast of The Simpsons eventually negotiated individual salaries in excess of $300,000 per episode, which was unprecedented in animation and set a new benchmark for the industry. Fact 147. The word embiggen, coined for The Simpsons episode Lisa the Iconoclast in Season 7, was added to the Merriam-Webster Dictionary in 2018. The episode introduced the word as part of Springfield's founding motto, "A noble spirit embiggens the smallest man," and the word became so widely used in real-world contexts, including in scientific literature, where it was adopted by physicists to describe the expansion of objects that it qualified for dictionary inclusion. This is one of the more concrete examples of the show contributing to the English language, rather than simply reflecting it. Fact 148. The phrase D.O., Homer's signature expression of frustration, was added to the Oxford English Dictionary in 2001. The word is listed as an interjection, meaning used to comment on a foolish or stupid action, especially one's own. The dictionary entry credits The Simpsons as the source. Dough was not invented by the show. Dan Castellaneta based it on a sound made by actor James Finlayson in old Laurel and Hardy films, but the show made it universal. It is now part of the English language in a way that requires no further attribution. Fact 149. The Simpsons has been broadcast in more countries than any other animated series in history. It has been dubbed into dozens of languages, each of which required not just translation, but cultural adaptation, jokes that depend on American English wordplay, references that depend on specific American cultural knowledge, character names that may not function in a different language's phonetics. The French version was dubbed by an entirely separate voice cast. The German version made different comedic choices. The show's international success required sustained creative work by teams of translators and adapters across multiple decades. Fact 150. The show has a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, awarded in 2020. The star is the first ever awarded to a non-live-action television series. The five-pointed star contains the show's title and is located in a section of the walk that includes stars for major entertainment figures. The awarding of the star was treated as a significant institutional recognition of the show's place in American cultural history. Matt Groening attended the ceremony. So did the cast. It was, by all accounts, a deeply unusual experience, celebrating a cartoon by standing on a sidewalk. Fact 151. Academic courses on The Simpsons have been offered at universities including the University of California, Berkeley, Harvard, and the University of Glasgow. These courses have approached the show from perspectives including philosophy, sociology, economics, political science, and cultural studies. The show has been used to teach Aristotelian ethics, Kantian moral philosophy, free market economics, and Marxist cultural theory. The breadth of academic engagement with the show is a testament to how much is actually going on beneath the comedy, and to the show's writers' practice of grounding jokes in genuine intellectual substance. Fact 152. The show has been credited by specialists in evolutionary biology, of all things, with helping to popularize the idea of natural selection among non-specialist audiences. Episodes dealing with evolution, genetics, and mutation have been taught alongside actual biology texts in some secondary school contexts. Professor Paul Halpern of the University of the Sciences in Philadelphia has used Simpsons episodes in physics courses because, as he has argued, the show communicates complex scientific ideas with an accessibility and humor that dry textbook writing cannot match. Fact 153. The show has been cited by urban planners as an unusually effective tool for teaching students about municipal dysfunction. The Springfield city government, its corruption, its incompetence, its responsiveness to the interests of wealthy individuals over the needs of ordinary residents, mirrors documented patterns in real American municipalities in ways that students find immediately recognizable and immediately funny. Laughing at Quimby makes the underlying critique easier to absorb. The joke carries the lesson without the lesson needing to announce itself. Fact 154. The Simpsons contributed to a significant shift in how American television was scheduled. Before the show's success, Sunday nights at 8 p.m. were not considered a prestige slot for comedy. The show's dominance of that time slot across the 1990s established Sunday evening as a destination for ambitious television comedy, a pattern that other networks and other shows subsequently tried to replicate. The shift in Sunday night programming can be traced with reasonable precision to the show's early success. Fact 155. The show's financial impact on Fox has been incalculable in any precise sense but significant in every approximate one. Fox was a relatively new network when The Simpsons premiered. It had been founded only 3 years earlier and was not yet considered a serious competitor to ABC, CBS, and NBC. The show's success provided Fox with its first real claim to cultural legitimacy and gave the network the financial foundation to invest in the programming slate that eventually established it as a major network. People inside Fox have described The Simpsons as the show that built the network. Fact 156. The show has affected global fashion in ways that are difficult to fully track. The Simpsons merchandise produced during the Bart Mania of the early 90s was one of the first major examples of animated character merchandising becoming a genuine fashion phenomenon rather than simply a children's market. Bart's face on a t-shirt was a cultural statement in 1991. It was a signal about what the wearer found funny, what they valued, what they were willing to be associated with. Cartoon characters on adult clothing is now entirely unremarkable. In 1990, it was slightly transgressive. Fact 157. The show's influence on animation itself is profound. Before The Simpsons, primetime animation was essentially not considered a viable format for adult comedy in America. The show demonstrated that animation could sustain complex storytelling, sophisticated humor, and genuine emotional depth not just for children but for general audiences. This opened a door that shows like South Park, Family Guy, Futurama, Archer, Bob's Burgers, and dozens of others have walked through. The primetime animated comedy genre that now seems like an established part of the television landscape was created almost entirely by The Simpsons' success. Fact 158. Futurama, which Groening co-created with David X. Cohen, was developed partly because Groening wanted a space to tell stories that The Simpsons format could not accommodate. Futurama dealt more directly with science fiction, with questions about the future, with the implications of technology in ways that the grounded Springfield reality made difficult. The two shows share DNA but are distinct. Futurama is in many ways the more formally ambitious of the two, willing to take structural risks and engage with genuinely complex science fiction concepts that would be out of place in Springfield. Fact 159. The show has been used in conflict resolution training in at least one documented corporate context, with business consultants using Simpsons episodes to illustrate examples of poor communication, failed leadership, and dysfunctional team dynamics. Homer's managerial style, or rather, the complete absence of anything resembling a managerial style, is a useful teaching tool because it presents every possible error in workplace leadership without any ironic detachment. Homer is not pretending to be a bad manager. He genuinely does not know what he is doing, which makes the examples pure. Fact 160. The Simpsons theme has been performed by symphonies on every inhabited continent. Full orchestral performances of the show's score, including the theme, various episode-specific compositions, and the musical numbers from celebrity appearances, have been staged as concert events. This trajectory from animated TV show music to concert hall programming represents an unusual journey for any piece of composition, but the score's genuine musical quality made it possible. Danny Elfman wrote something that works in a concert hall as well as it works on screen. Fact 161. The show has generated more licensed merchandise than any other animated property in television history, with total merchandise sales estimated in the tens of billions of dollars across the show's run. This encompasses everything from action figures and t-shirts to cologne, cereal, video games, theme park attractions, tabletop games, and dozens of categories of product that have no particular logical connection to the show, but bear the characters' images, because the characters carry commercial value. Homer Simpson's face has sold products that Homer Simpson would be entirely bewildered to be associated with. Fact 162. Universal Studios theme parks on 3 continents feature Springfield attractions. The Springfield section of Universal Orlando opened in 2013, includes full-scale recreations of Moe's Tavern, Krusty Burger, the Quickie Mart, and other Springfield locations. The physical realization of Springfield in 3 dimensions, at human scale, walkable, and purchasable, is one of the stranger consequences of the show's success. You can sit at Moe's bar, you can buy a squishy. Springfield is, in this specific sense, a real place. Fact 163. The show has contributed to the American political vocabulary in ways that persist even among people who do not actively watch it. Descriptions of political figures as Quimby-esque, references to the Springfield approach to civic problems, citations of specific Simpsons episodes in serious policy discussions, all of these appear in published journalism and political commentary. The show has become part of the shared cultural reference library that Americans use to describe their world to each other. Fact 164. The show has been referenced in academic papers in fields including mathematics, physics, neuroscience, economics, political science, sociology, philosophy, literature, film studies, and several others. The number of citations of Simpsons episodes in peer-reviewed academic journals is difficult to count, but is certainly in the thousands. This academic engagement reflects the show's unusual combination of genuine intellectual content and enormous cultural reach. It is the most accessible vehicle for certain complex ideas in American mass media. Fact 165. Perhaps the show's most important cultural contribution is the most difficult to measure. It modeled a specific kind of American self-criticism. The show looked at the American family, the American workplace, the American community, and the American government and found them all falling significantly short of their stated ideals, and it made this observation lovingly, without cruelty, with a genuine warmth for the people trapped inside imperfect systems. This combination, critical but not contemptuous, funny but not dismissive, established a template for how a culture can talk about itself honestly without hatred. That template has been imperfectly applied by many successors, but was first and most completely realized in Springfield. Section 8. Controversies, Bans, and Battles. Facts 166 through 180. Fact 166. The Simpsons has been banned or heavily edited in numerous countries at various points in its history. Brazil restricted the show's broadcast on children's television schedules after parental groups argued that Bart's behavior was a negative influence on young viewers. Several Middle Eastern countries have broadcast edited versions of the show in which Homer's beer is replaced with soda. The can design remains the same, but the contents have been officially reclassified by the local broadcaster. The editing is not always particularly seamless. Fact 167. China banned The Simpsons from its primetime schedule in 2006 as part of a broader government decision to restrict foreign animated content in primetime slots in order to support domestic Chinese animation production. The ban applied to all foreign animation, not specifically to The Simpsons, but the show was affected. It continues to be available in China in other formats and has a significant Chinese audience, though the relationship between the show and Chinese broadcasting regulators has remained complicated over the years. Fact 168. The episode Stark Raving Dad, featuring Michael Jackson under a pseudonym, was pulled from circulation by the show itself in 2019 following the documentary Leaving Neverland, which made detailed allegations of child sexual abuse against Jackson. The showrunners announced the decision to remove the episode from streaming platforms and syndication, and it has not been broadcast since. The episode had been one of the show's most beloved and widely seen installments. The decision to pull it was described by the producers as a personal and ethical decision rather than a business one. Fact 169. The episode Homer and Apu, in which Homer exposes Apu's practice of selling expired food, gets Apu fired, and eventually helps restore him to his position, was criticized after the premiere of the Problem with Apu documentary as an example of the show's handling of the Apu character at its most problematic. The episode had been considered a fan favorite for decades. Its reception changed significantly in the context of a broader conversation about how the Apu character represented South Asian people on American television. Fact 170. The show faced significant internal controversy in 2015 when Harry Shearer publicly announced that he was leaving the show due to disputes over his contract. Shearer, who voices more major characters than any other cast member, made his announcement on Twitter, which was itself a somewhat unusual public relations approach for a contract negotiation. The showrunners indicated they would recast his characters if necessary. After a period of negotiation, Shearer returned. The potential loss of Burns, Skinner, Flanders, Smithers, and a dozen other characters was so significant that the show's future would have been fundamentally altered. Fact 171. The episode The City of New York vs. Homer Simpson, which featured extended sequences set in and around the World Trade Center, was pulled from syndication after September 11, 2001, and remained off the air for years. When it returned, its reception had changed entirely. The sequences that had been purely comedic, Homer being humiliated at the base of the Twin Towers, had been transformed by grief into something that could not be watched the same way anymore. The episode is now broadcast again but remains among the show's most contextually complicated installments. Fact 172. The show has faced criticism from religious groups across multiple traditions for its treatment of organized religion. Ned Flanders's evangelical Christianity has been called both a loving parody and a condescending caricature, depending on who is doing the criticizing. The show's depiction of Catholicism, Judaism, Hinduism, and other traditions has generated various objections over the years. The show's consistent position has been that it is not mocking religion itself, but rather the specific social and institutional forms that religion takes in American communities, a distinction that critics of the show have not always found convincing. Fact 173. Advertisers have occasionally refused to be associated with specific episodes they found objectionable. The show's more politically charged episodes, its more darkly satirical content, and its occasional excursions into material that corporate advertisers found risky have all generated instances of advertising withdrawal. These instances are significant because they represent the tension between the show's creative ambitions and the commercial reality that funds it. The show has generally maintained its creative independence in these conflicts, but the tensions have never entirely resolved. Fact 174. The Simpsons has been involved in at least one significant legal dispute involving the similarity between its fictional Springfield and real American Springfields. The legal principle that fictional places with generic names do not generate actionable claims against real places with the same name has been applied consistently, but various municipalities have occasionally taken issue with specific episode content that they felt reflected badly on their actual communities. These disputes have not resulted in successful legal action against the show. Fact 175. The show's satirical treatment of Fox News, the cable news network that, like The Simpsons itself, is owned by the same parent company, has generated some of the show's most pointed and most controversial sequences. A running gag presents Fox News with a chyron that reads, "Not racist, but has-hone with racists." The chyron has appeared in multiple episodes. Fox News has not publicly responded to its portrayal in any formal way, which is probably the wisest available response to being satirized by a show you cannot control without generating more satirical material. Fact 176. The episode that explicitly depicted The Simpsons as participants in a reality television show, a send-up of the genre that had become dominant in early 2000s American television, was received with mixed feelings, partly because reality television was itself so new that the show's satirical frame was not yet fully established. The episode now reads as a document of a specific cultural transition point. Reality television was strange enough in 2003 that a comedy show depicting The Simpsons in a reality show format felt bold. It would feel much less bold 10 years later, when reality television had simply become television. Fact 177. The show's relationship with the internet and digital culture has evolved continuously as both phenomena have changed. Early episodes occasionally depicted the internet in ways that now seem quaint. Later episodes engaged with social media, streaming culture, and the attention economy in ways that are more current. The show's ability to engage with new, technology-driven cultural phenomena reflects the continuing presence on the writing staff of people who are active participants in the culture they are satirizing. Fact 178. Several former writers of the show have publicly criticized the show's later seasons in terms that generated significant media coverage. These criticisms have ranged from concerns about the writing quality to frustrations with the institutional conservatism of a show that has been running for so long that changing direction requires confronting enormous inertia. The showrunners have responded to some of these criticisms and declined to engage with others. The debate about the show's later quality is one of the longest-running arguments in American television culture. Fact 179. The show was the subject of a federal inquiry in the early 1990s, when congressional representatives raised concerns about its influence on children's behavior. The inquiry was part of a broader congressional concern about violence and inappropriate content in entertainment media, and The Simpsons was named alongside other controversial programs. The inquiry did not result in any regulatory action, but it established a pattern of political attention to the show that has persisted in various forms across its history. Fact 180. The show has survived every prediction of its imminent cancellation or creative collapse that critics and industry observers have made over the past 3 decades. In the mid-1990s, several critics predicted it would not survive past Season 10. When Season 10 arrived, they moved the prediction to Season 15, at Season 15 to Season 20. The show has now run almost twice as long as its most pessimistic critics imagined possible, which is itself a form of statement about the inadequacy of predictions in the face of a show that keeps, somehow, finding reasons to continue. Section 9. The Treehouse of Horror, a universe unto itself. Facts 181 through 192. Fact 181. The first Treehouse of Horror episode aired in October of 1990 during the show's second season. The format was established immediately 3 short segments, each presenting a dark or horror-themed story that would be impossible within the show's normal reality, framed by the Simpson kids telling stories in a treehouse. The framing device was abandoned relatively quickly, but the structure of 3 segments per special has been maintained through every subsequent Halloween episode. The title Treehouse of Horror has remained even as the treehouse itself largely disappeared from the framing. Fact 182. The Treehouse of Horror episodes are the only episodes of the show that regularly kill major characters, including members of the Simpson family. Homer has been killed in Treehouse episodes more times than in any other context. Bart has died, Lisa has died. The Springfield residents have been massacred as a group on several occasions. The deaths do not carry into subsequent episodes, not even subsequent Treehouse episodes, and the show's traditional rules about character permanence are suspended for the duration of the special. This permission structure is one of the things that makes the specials creatively distinct. Fact 183. The most celebrated individual Treehouse segment is probably Homer Cubed from Treehouse of Horror 6, in which Homer accidentally steps into a 3-dimensional world and experiences a genuinely unsettling existential crisis about the nature of his own reality. The sequence was technologically groundbreaking for its time. It used 3-dimensional computer animation integrated with the show's traditional 2-dimensional style in a way that created a vertiginous, genuinely strange visual experience. The segment ends with Homer not returning to Springfield, but instead emerging into what appears to be a real, live-action street, where he visits an adult novelty store. The tonal shift is deliberate and deeply weird. Fact 184. The Treehouse episodes have adapted virtually every major horror property in American culture, often producing definitive parody versions that outlasted the original property's public cultural moment. The Shining parody The Shining remains one of the most beloved Simpsons segments ever produced. Kang and Kodos, the show's recurring alien villains who appear in almost every Treehouse special, began as a single-episode creation and became permanent fixtures of the Halloween universe, occasionally appearing in other contexts to deliver the show's more cynical political commentary. Fact 185. Kang and Kodos, the tentacled, one-eyed aliens who observe and occasionally menace Springfield, were named after characters from the original Star Trek series. Kang was a recurring Klingon villain. Kodos was a one-time character from a particularly dark episode. The show chose the names specifically because Star Trek was a touchstone for the show's writing staff, and because the names had the right alien-sounding phonetics. The aliens have since become entirely the show's own. They bear no resemblance in character or function to their Star Trek namesakes. Fact 186. The Treehouse specials have been used to parody works including The Shining, Nightmare on Elm Street, Poltergeist, It, The Fly, Citizen Kane, The Island of Dr. Moreau, The Devil and Daniel Webster, Edgar Allan Poe's complete works, Twilight Zone episodes, The Birds, Jurassic Park, King Kong, The Night of the Living Dead, and dozens of other horror and science fiction properties. The show has developed what amounts to a thorough curriculum of genre parody over 23 specials, covering the canon comprehensively. Fact 187. The specials always air in October but are typically set without specific seasonal reference. The characters do not discuss Halloween within the special's narrative. The framing conceit is simply that these are stories being told, not that the family is celebrating a holiday. This is partly practical. Keeping the content free of specific holiday trappings means the specials can be broadcast in reruns at any point in the year without feeling out of context and partly tonal. The horror of the Treehouse universe does not require a holiday permission slip. Fact 188. The segment The Devil and Homer Simpson from Treehouse of Horror 4 is regularly cited as one of the greatest individual segments the show has ever produced. Homer sells his soul to the devil for a donut. The devil is revealed to be Ned Flanders. Homer is put on trial for breach of contract. And Marge produces Homer's old love letter to her that was written on a donut, which means Homer technically sold the donut rather than his soul, because a man who truly loves his wife would never put her behind anything. The story's resolution is emotionally satisfying in a way that is genuinely surprising given that the episode is a horror parody. Fact 189. The Treehouse episodes were initially opposed by the network on the grounds that mixing horror and comedy in a primetime family animation format was risky and potentially off-putting to viewers. The first special aired with a disclaimer warning parents that the episode contained scary content. The disclaimer was itself a joke framed as coming from the show's characters rather than from the network, and it established a tradition of opening disclaimers for Treehouse episodes that have become a comedic tradition. In their own right, the network eventually stopped fighting the specials when it became clear they were among the most watched episodes of each season. Fact 190. The Treehouse episodes have, over time, moved away from pure horror parody toward a broader engagement with dark science fiction, dystopia, and satirical speculation. More recent specials have included segments that are less about horror genre conventions and more about anxieties specific to contemporary American life. Fears about technology, surveillance, the pace of social change. The format has expanded to accommodate a wider range of dark subject matter, which some fans welcome as evidence of the format's flexibility, and others find a dilution of what the specials were originally designed to do. Fact 191. The animation in Treehouse episodes has traditionally been pushed slightly further than in regular episodes, more extreme expressions, slightly more violent action, visual effects that would not appear in standard installments. The permission granted by the special format extends to the animation team, who use the Halloween episodes as opportunities to experiment and push beyond the show's normal visual grammar. Some of the show's most visually inventive individual moments have appeared in Treehouse segments, rather than in standard episodes. Fact 192. The cultural impact of the Treehouse specials has been substantial. They are frequently cited as the first exposure many viewers had to horror genre conventions, and they have shaped how a generation thinks about specific horror tropes and properties. The Shinning segment introduced a significant portion of the show's audience to the Stanley Kubrick film that it parodies. The Poe readings in the first special, in which James Earl Jones reads The Raven while Homer plays out the poem's narrative, introduced many young viewers to Poe's work in a way that was accessible without being condescending. The specials have functioned as cultural education through the vehicle of entertainment, which is probably the most effective educational method available. Section 10. The Final Mysteries, Loose Threads, and Unanswered Questions. Facts 193 through 200. Fact 193. The show has never explained how the Springfield nuclear power plant has remained operational despite its 342 documented safety violations. Within the show's universe, this is presented as the result of regulatory capture. Burns's wealth and influence have compromised the oversight mechanisms that should have shut the plant down decades ago. This is, as it happens, a very accurate description of how regulatory capture works in the real United States. Industries with significant political and economic power frequently avoid meaningful regulation, not through any dramatic conspiracy, but through the slow, systemic colonization of the agencies meant to oversee them. Fact 194. The show has never definitively resolved the question of whether Homer's extraordinary physical resilience, his ability to survive falls, explosions, electrocutions, and other events that should be immediately fatal, is the result of mutation, luck, cartoon physics, or something stranger. Various episodes have offered different implicit explanations. The consistency across 36 years and hundreds of survivable catastrophes suggests that whatever Homer's body is doing is not accidental. Something is protecting him. The show has never said what. Fact 195. The character of Frank Grimes, the competent, hardworking nuclear plant employee who appears in the Season 8 episode Homer's Enemy and is destroyed by the contrast between his own struggles and Homer's incomprehensible luck, died in that episode and has never returned. He is one of the show's only regular universe character deaths that has been treated as permanent. The episode is beloved and controversial, simultaneously beloved because it takes the premise of Homer's inexplicable good fortune seriously for the first time. Controversial because watching a good person destroyed by the unfairness of a world that rewards Homer instead of him is genuinely uncomfortable in a way that does not fully resolve into comedy. Grimes matters because he is the only character who ever looked at Springfield clearly and was destroyed by what he saw. Fact 196. The show has never explained the true nature of Springfield's legal jurisdiction. As discussed earlier, the town's geographic instability creates an ambiguity about which states' laws apply and which regulatory bodies have authority. This ambiguity has been exploited by the show for comedy but has never been resolved. Springfield exists in a legal gray area that is, within the show's own logic, exploited by Burns and potentially by others with enough resources and lawyers to take advantage of jurisdictional confusion. This is another case where the show's comedy reflects a real phenomenon, the way wealthy individuals and corporations seek legal environments most favorable to their interests. Fact 197. The relationship between Homer and Mr. Burns, which should be one of recognition and confrontation given that Burns is responsible for Homer's mother's exile, Burns benefits from Homer's incompetence, and Burns essentially owns the infrastructure of Homer's life, has never been fully reckoned with on screen. Homer has had moments of clarity about Burns. He has been angry at Burns. He has confronted Burns. But the full weight of what Burns has done to Homer's family has never generated the confrontation that the accumulated evidence would seem to require. Homer is not capable of sustaining that confrontation. His brain does not hold it. Every time the gravity of Burns's sins comes into focus, something intervenes. The crayon, the radiation, the fundamental resets of Springfield's reality, and the reckoning is deferred again. Fact 198. Lisa Simpson's future remains officially unresolved. The show has depicted multiple possible futures for Lisa across various flash-forward episodes and Treehouse of Horror specials. In some, she becomes the first female president of the United States. In others, she is a professor, a musician, a lawyer, a writer. The multiplicity of possible Lisas is appropriate. She is the show's character of greatest potential, and potential, by definition, has not yet resolved into a single outcome. She is still 8 years old. She is still playing the saxophone. She is still asking questions that nobody in Springfield wants to answer. Whatever she becomes, she has not become it yet. Fact 199. The show has never explained, within the logic of its own universe, how Maggie Simpson has remained 1 year old for 36 years. Every other character's arrested development can be attributed to the floating timeline. They are frozen, because the show's narrative requires them to be frozen. But Maggie's specific age one is young enough that even within the logic of a floating timeline, her stasis requires additional explanation. A 10-year-old can remain 10 across multiple years of television without comment. An infant remaining an infant for 3.5 decades is a different order of suspension. The show has never addressed this. Maggie simply continues to be one, sucking on her pacifier, watching everything, saying nothing. The mystery of what she is thinking has been running for longer than most of her viewers have been alive. Fact 200. The Simpsons has aired 788 episodes across 36 seasons. It is the longest-running American animated series, the longest-running American sitcom, and the longest-running scripted primetime television show in the history of the medium. It has been watched by hundreds of millions of people in dozens of countries. It has contributed words to the dictionary, ideas to the culture, and a specific form of compassionate satirical intelligence to the ongoing American conversation about who we are and how we are failing to live up to who we say we are. It began with a man sketching a yellow family in a hallway in Hollywood because he did not want to give up his rabbit. It has never stopped being, at its core, about the thing that family represents: the messy, faithful, infuriating, irreplaceable fact of people who have chosen each other and will not, regardless of what happens, stop choosing each other. That is what Springfield is. That is what the show has always been. And whether it runs for 10 more seasons or 10 more years, that truth is already settled. Homer will always find his way home. The couch will always be there. And somewhere, in a town that cannot quite be located on any map, the light is still on. That was 200 facts about The Simpsons. Some of them you knew. Some of them changed something. Some of them you will carry into your next rewatch and find yourself seeing the show a little differently because of them. Thank you for spending this time in Springfield. Thank you for letting these stories wash over you in the dark, or the quiet, or wherever you happen to be when you pressed play. The show has been running for 36 years and it is still going. Somewhere in a writer's room right now, someone is working on a joke that will be heard by tens of millions of people. Somewhere in a recording booth, Dan Castellaneta is finding something in Homer that is not quite on the page. Somewhere in a Korean animation studio, an artist is drawing a frame that will be on screen for 1/24th of a second and will be as carefully rendered as if it were meant to be seen forever. Springfield never sleeps. Springfield never changes. Springfield is always exactly where you left it. And tonight, wherever you are, you can rest knowing that. The family is on the couch. The light is warm. The loop is running. Sleep well.